Good morning, everyone. God is the Lord of history. Neither the affliction of Israel nor the plagues in Egypt were outside his control. The Pharaoh, the Egyptians, and all Israel saw the power of God. There is no one like God, majestic in holiness, awesome in glory and wonders. It is always reassuring to know that God remembers and is concerned about his people. What he promised centuries earlier to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God now begins to bring to pass: Israel's freedom from Egyptian bondage, as they set out for the land of promise. It is a fulfillment of God's promise in the covenant of Mount Sinai.
Please join me in a prayer of illumination. Gracious God, as we turn to your word for us, may the Spirit of God rest upon us. Help us to be steadfast in our hearing, in our speaking, in our believing, and in our living. Amen. Today's scripture reading is taken from Exodus chapter 14, verses 5 to 14, and then skipping to 19 to 27, and ending with chapter 15, verses 20 and 21. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed towards the people. And they said, "What have we done letting Israel leave our service?" So he had his chariot made ready. He took the army with him. He took 600 picked chariots and other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites, who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his chariot drivers, and his army. They overtook them, camped by the sea.
As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone, and let us serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still."
Moving ahead to verse 19, the angel of God, who was going before the Israelite army, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and took its place behind them. It came between the army of Egypt and the army of Israel. And so the cloud was there with the darkness, and it lit up the night. One did not come near the other all night.
Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on dry land, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, the Lord, in the pillar of fire and cloud, looked down upon the Egyptian army, and threw the Egyptian army into panic. They clogged their chariot wheels, so that they turned with difficulty. The Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt."
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and chariot drivers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea.
Now reading chapter 15, verse 20 and 21. Then the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and with dancing. And Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.